I'd like to talk a little bit about, I've gotten the opportunity, just so you know where I'm sharing from, like you, I've gotten to see employers set expectations for employees, and I've gotten to see employees misstep, mistake, and fail. Whether it's moral failure or whether it's just professional failure. But we all misstep, we all make mistakes, and we all fail from time to time. And so today, the talk is kind of coming out of those worlds of what I've seen and who I want to be. And so this is something that I've been noodling on for, as you know, a long time, and I'm sure you have too, is what kind of person, leader, do we want to be in our employment, in our place, where we're encouraging employees or coworkers or leaders at other places. And so the topic is restorative leadership, and the subtitle, just a leader's heart to reveal the gospel. So as we go into that, there's been a few statistics that have kind of been resonating in me, and these are things I'm sure you've already read about, but just kind of so you know where I'm kind of coming from. One of the things that kind of caught my mind was there's about 100 million people, and the studies change, but 100 million people in the private sector of the American economy who are employed, and a large majority of them are at-will employees. At-will employees, and if you've ever been one, you know what that means. We serve at the pleasure of the employer, and if they don't pleasure us, they get rid of us. And so that idea of it's their discretion, whether it's a good reason, no reason, or a bad reason, they can let you go. And a couple million people a year get fired, and a couple 100,000 of those, experts say, are unjust firings. So that was just one of the statistics. I think the other one that I've been noodling on and kind of researching a little bit is this idea of the Great Resignation. I'm sure you've read a ton on that, and I bet even more importantly, you've been experiencing it. But the Great Resignation, one of the things that I've been thinking about, just statistics, 47.8 million people quit their jobs in 2021. And so a lot of people have been thinking that that was COVID related. And when you get deeper into the statistics and the research, you begin to see it's not just a short-term turbulence, but it's been a long-term trend. And so it's been interesting to see the statistics that have come from 2009 through 2021 and how there's been this progressive increase in the quit rates, people quitting. So they estimate over 4 million a month are quitting their jobs. And have you experienced it? I've experienced it. Like I go into a restaurant and there's 2 servers for twice the size of this room, and so they're only serving X number of tables. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, are we still doing this? And it's not. And they're like, no, it's nothing to do with that. We just don't have employees. Up in Romeo, where I live, Taco Bell closes at 6 p.m. Arby's doesn't even open on the weekends, which is really good for me because, as you can see, I don't need any fast food. But when you look at the statistics from 2009 to 2019, what you see is this 1/10 or a 0.10 percentage point increase every year in the quit rate. And so you're seeing it from 2009 to 10 to 11 to 12. And then when you get to 2020, which is kind of where everybody was kind of thinking like the pandemic was the cause of this, but what you see is a dip in 2020 in the quit rates. The reason is that we were all uncertain about what was going to happen. So a lot less people quit their job in 2020, but soon after in 21, when things kind of stabilized a little bit more, then people made up for not quitting in 20, they quit in 21. And the people and the normal people who quit in 21 added to that big number. But now the projections are back to this steady increase. So if you look at a bar graph, you just see it going from here to here to here from 2009 through 2021. And the projection is that it has nothing to do with the pandemic, but we're going to continue seeing this quit rate continue to increase. So when I think about this, I've been personally impacted, I'm sure you have, trying to hire people. I'm trying to hire people in 2 fields, right? One is the law firm, I'm trying to hire people, and I'm trying to hire people in the church world. And I'm struggling to find people for either. And I'm offering incredible rates, so you know some people. But I'm offering incredible salaries and flexibility and all these things, and it is just hard to find people. So not only is it hard to find people on the front end, but what if your culture in your company is not such a great culture and you're part of the reason for the quit rate? That your culture isn't a retention keeping culture, but people come in, experience it, and then they leave because there's something missing or there's some difference that they're looking for. So as I'm experiencing, I was just thinking about this worker shortage and the retention rates and what can I do personally. And so this has been just something I've been thinking on, researching, wondering, praying about, and I hope you know much more about this than I do, and we can talk about that. But what can we look at for cultural trends in 22 that would help us in the marketplace? So a few cultural trends that I've been reading about. Cultural trend number one, flexibility rates. These flexibility rules, this idea of whether it's returning to the office, going remote, or a hybrid of that, employees want flexibility. But it's far beyond where they work. The flexibility comes in, they want engagement in the decision making. They want to be part of decision making. And so this flexibility is they're looking for to be engaged in the process of leading the company. And whether it's at a high level, but they're looking for some level of engagement. It's interesting that when employees expect increased flexibility in many aspects of their work, if they don't find it in your place, they will continue looking to find it in some other place. One statistic that I like is when employees find flexibility, there's a 41% likelihood of engagement and a 77% higher retention rate. So when they experience the flexibility rules, that engages them to want to stay. Cultural trend number two, rebuilding connection. After 2 years of disruption, right, and removal from social engagement in the workplace, there is a desperate and urgent need to reconnect employees with one another and reconnect employees with the organization. This idea that the bonds of employees have been socially fragmented because they're not doing social activities as much anymore. Companies are doing less things. We used to do attorney and spouse dinners, and we don't do those anymore. So we just, I see it in my own experience. The church that I worked at, somebody had, I wasn't there yesterday, but somebody had COVID, and they had to shut down the whole office, and 100 employees had to go home, and they did, fogged it up, and so it was interesting just how much lacking that we are in the rebuilding of connection. And this leads to people feeling isolated, unsupported, and excluded from others. Yet when employees feel a strong connection to the team, listen to these stats, they are 30 times more likely to do great work, 3 times more likely to stay with the organization, and 96% less likely to burn out. Some pretty good stats. If we can rebuild the connections to employees with each other, most people, I think it's 57% of employees feel disconnected from their leader. And so how can we as leaders stay connected with our employees? The cultural trend number 3 is restorative leadership. And this is where I want to hang out for a while and talk a little bit about this, go deeper with this idea of restorative leadership. And I was doing some research the other day, so just like what comes up on Google. All kinds of things come up under Google when you do restorative leadership. So let me define it as to what I'm going to talk about. What does restorative mean? Having the power to restore, to rebuild, to fix, to reinstate, to bring back. So when somebody falls, mistakes, mishaps, failures, do we reinstate? Do we rebuild? Do we fix the situation, or do we show them the door? What is a restorative culture? The way I've defined it for myself and for our talk is a people who desire not only professional health, not only success and profitability and advancement, those are all wonderful and good things, but also care for the mental and emotional well-being of their employees. They're considering the whole person, not just a part of the person. How many times I've been at a place where I've been working and they just wanted the best of me, and they wanted me to be on my best every day, Monday through Saturday, and to give them 10 to 12 hours a day, have no issues that come along with me. I have a wife and 3 daughters. I got some challenges at home. I have a 20-year-old daughter who's right here in front. She's working with me at the law firm and cannot wait to graduate from Oakland University and go off and be marketing. And I'm trying to persuade her, paralegal is the way. She just looks at me and she says, you got to work on your retention rate. I have an 18-year-old daughter who's graduating high school, and I have a 12-year-old 7th grader. So I got challenges at home. In fact, I will tell you personally, this last year has been the hardest year I think our family has ever experienced. Dealing with a number of things inside our family. And you better believe that affects me when I go to work. I can't just leave it at home or leave it in the car. But I bring that into work. It just affects my spirit, affects my mind. I'm distracted. I needed to stay home to help with our youngest child, with my wife, to help with her over this past year, which meant I was getting into work 2 hours later than I normally did. And I had to leave earlier to get home to help. And I went in and I talked to one of the partners, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know what's going on. And he's like, family first. Always. Family first. You take care of the family, and we'll be patient and go with you in this way. So let's understand the restorative leadership culture. The first question I like to answer is why? Why should we even consider or build a restorative culture? Building a restorative community and culture develops employees, and we can become catalysts of grace. I tend to believe from my experience that people either lean to one end of the spectrum, either catalysts of judgment and repercussions and consequences, or catalysts of grace. And we're probably somewhere in between. Depends on the day, right? And if the day was good, maybe you're leaning into the catalyst of grace. If the day was rough, and you might be leaning somewhere else. But I want to encourage us today to be agents of grace, to be catalysts of grace, to consider the entire person. That the person isn't just the person at work, that they're married or they're single, they're having struggles and challenges like we do. Let's not deny the fact that we also have challenges and struggles as leaders. We might be the boss of tens or hundreds or thousands of people, but we're real people too. And are we being authentically the same person in every context? Important thing about grace is this, that no one has graduated from the need of grace. Every one of us needs it. No one is safe from a moment of pride, a flash of lust. No one is above irritation, anger, jealousy, or impatience. None of us here have unmixed and pure motives all of the time. No one is completely done, mature, but we're in process. Hopefully moving along in the right direction. When an employee fails, they need restorative grace to pick them up and help them get back on track. And the failure can either be a temporary interruption or a permanent disruption. Every one of us is called to be agents of God's restoring grace. And God can use this as merciful, but also convicting. This opportunity where some problem gets exposed. I mean, isn't this true? Even as you study the good book, James would say that every trial, challenge, and difficulty comes along for a good reason, so that we can toughen up and pursue full maturity and completion. So why can't that also be true in the workplace? In the marketplace, when people have trials, difficulty, missteps, mistakes, failures, why isn't that an opportunity to see them grow and hopefully even be better and stronger in the workplace? One thing that I believe, if you've ever studied teaching, which I'm sure you've had to study a book or so, do you remember that concept, more is caught than taught? You catch things casually. It's like your parents when you were young, because I have little ones now. I can say one thing, but they're watching me. And they see when I'm inconsistent, I'm inauthentic. When they see I'm doing something that I'm not saying, or I'm saying something that I don't do, they catch it and they expose that. I don't know why. They should just go along with what I said. But I think employees might be a little bit more tight-lipped, at least the smart ones, are a little more tight-lipped about that. But they see it too, don't they? They see it when we say something, but we don't even do it. We do not need to always replace the Lord as the great convictor. And sometimes you might think I'm talking about glossing over things. I'm not talking about glossing over mistakes and failures and problems with an employee. But I would also say this, more is caught than taught. Meaning that the Lord can convict in his own way. He can teach lessons in his own way. Other employees can help teach. The boss doesn't always have to be the great teacher. and exposer of the problem and the failure, there's a lot of grace that can come along and allow other people and even our Lord to do some of the convicting and teaching. Just making room for other people. Sometimes the leader speaks so directly, so confrontationally, so much on the matter that there's no room for anyone else to speak. So why do we need a restorative culture? It's not only for our employees, but I would tell you it's also for you and me. Everybody believes in grace and restoration for others until the key leader needs grace and restoration. See, the higher up on the organizational chart that you are, when you fail and you fall, the greater the sound of the boom when you hit the ground. And for some reason, there's a lot less grace that goes to the number 1 and number 2 leaders than for the employees. And so we need to create a culture where we're surrounded by people who believe the best in us. We need to be surrounded by people who we've invested in, given grace to, that they might give it back to us when we need it. See, we may fail in our vision. Have you ever evolved the vision? And when you evolve the vision of your company, doesn't that mean your previous vision maybe wasn't as sufficient as the new vision? We may fail in our management of our people. We may fail in the profits. So bonuses are short. People have to be let go, whatever it is. But we may fail and misstep from time to time. But if you nurture a culture of restorative grace inside your place, then the hope is it's there for one another, but it's also there for the leader when she makes a mistake or he does. The Bible says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. A lot to learn from that simple verse. Above all, love. Because love will cover and wash over when you do make the misstep and the mistake. A restorative culture of grace and helping people survive beyond their mistakes is daily demonstrating love. So if you get that idea that as you are an agent and catalyst of grace and you're inspiring tens or hundreds or thousands of people to be agents of grace to one another, that we're going to pick each other up when we fall, then you are spreading love all of the time. And that love will cover the sin and mistakes that we make. For me, of course, I've made missteps, mistakes, and failures along the way. I've experienced leaders who were not catalysts of grace, and I've experienced leaders who are catalysts of grace. Some of this has been in the marketplace, and some of it has been in the church world. If you have not worked in the church world, it's not always agents of grace. It gets a little wonky in the church world. One leader in particular in my life in the marketplace is a non-confrontational person. He does not, very successful guy, one of the most brilliant guys I've ever met in my life, and non-confrontational, successful, but does not like to deal with confrontation. You would even say he probably glosses over much of it. For somebody like me, the Lord's going to do a lot of work in my heart. I can't escape my mistakes and my failures, and the Lord is working. But the fact that God gave me a human leader who gave room for the Lord to do some of the work, He's won my heart. Given me grace, but yet I knew there was these things to learn along the way over these last 28 years. The second question, if you're interested, is how? How do we deal with this? How do we create this culture? It takes a lot of daily restoration and grace-filled actions to get employees to give grace to each other. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you can give grace and encouragement and a hand to lift up an employee, but you watch the employees with one another, it's some kind of show. It's not always so good. Like, they go after each other. And I learned something a long time ago, and I try to practice it, not perfectly by any means, but 9 encouragements for every 1 challenge. Have you ever heard that line? Something to that effect? You have to do like 9 times of encouraging, building up for every challenge you give. And I would suggest this in the restorative grace culture. The idea is 9 acts of grace to your employees for one act of grace to one another. It needs to be filled with a grace culture. We think we know someone and never believe that person could do what they just did. Whether it was a mistake, mishap, failure, moral failure, we never would believe it. And when we are unprepared for that, our compassion flips to anger, disappointment. How could they do this? We could never expect that person would have done that here. When in reality, shouldn't we understand the inevitability? People are going to make mistakes, failures. It's inevitable. You've made them, I've made them, you probably less than me, and our employees will make these missteps and failures. We should anticipate that those are coming and be ready for them. If unprepared for those restorative moments, we tend to give severance packages and walk them to the door. And sometimes that is exactly what you need to do for a recalcitrant person who is unwilling to learn, but after a grace-filled, wholehearted, saturated opportunity to try to restore them. And when they walk out that door with the severance or no severance, they understand one day that you did everything you could. But sometimes it's time to let them go. It's not time to gloss over, it's time to deal with it. It's trials and challenges are opportunities for us all to grow. Because sin, mistakes, failures continue to exist, every Christian leader needs to be prepared and committed to a restorative response to foreseeable missteps. This is the restorative heart of the Redeemer. One thing I want for me is I want to be more and more like Christ and his leadership. I'm far from it, but I want to head that direction. You might remember the story of the employee Jonah, and he worked for the top guy. And the top guy told him to go to a certain place and accomplish a very important objective, and Jonah did not want to go. Jonah did not have any interest in helping that group of people out, so he went the opposite direction. I wonder if you and I were Jonah's boss, what we would have done. But I'll tell you what his boss did. His boss took time to work around the people that he was around on the boat. He took time, 3 days and 3 nights, to grab Jonah's heart, not just his obedience. He grabbed his heart at Jonah's speed, not at the boss's speed. He took time to work on his employee. That employee, Jonah, eventually went to where he was told to go. An amazing thing happened, and Jonah still wasn't happy about it. But he did the right thing with the right encouragement and the right grace. One thing I learned along the way is that time that the boss took with Jonah wasn't very efficient. The boss could have gotten it done faster, send somebody else, twist the arm. But one of the best quotes I've ever learned is efficiency is the enemy of relationship. Efficiency is the enemy of relationship. This idea that relationships take time, energy, effort, they're messy, difficult, they're messy in the workplace and they're messy outside the workplace. They take a lot of time. Efficiency is the enemy of relationship, but relationship is where sustainable growth and success and profit ultimately come. And efficiency, you will work with people, you will get everything you can out of them, you will burn them out, and you will exit them. And in this market, with these quit rates, with non-retention, we don't have the privilege to do that. Nor is it a privilege to be that. We want to be catalysts of grace. The law firm I've been at for the last 22 years, I'm just astounded. It has nothing to do with me. The partners have been together for 45 years. The office manager has been there 40 years. The administrative assistant, 37 years, 22 years, 17, just to name a few. That retention caught my eye. I've been there 22 years. The guy next to me, 22 years. It's just, there's a reason why people stay at some places. And it's because I've gotten to experience that restorative, grace-filled culture. I noticed one thing. I moved from Michigan to the Pacific Northwest in 2017 and experienced Oregon, came running back in 2019, right before it got even crazier than it already was. And I called the managing partner and said, hey, do you have any room for me? You know, I worked for you for 20 years, can I come back? And he said, absolutely, what took you so long? And so I came back, and I was at an attorney spouse dinner, and all of a sudden one of the named partners was telling my story about moving to the Northwest and coming back, but he wasn't really talking about me. He was talking about the firm's commitment to restore people back in, and how he loved that. So restorative efforts are about fresh starts and beginnings. Sometimes the challenging trials employees bring into our life are to build them up. But can I also say sometimes the challenge that employees bring are to expose our hearts. You ever been too upset? Have you ever caught yourself being too upset about a minor thing? That's somebody doing work on your heart, exposing it, and will you do something about that? If you're interested in taking a next step, I'll tell you one of the best books I've ever read is The Tale of Three Kings. The Tale of Three Kings by Gene Edwards. I bought it in Audible, and it's fantastic. But it's about the non-restorative heart of King Saul and the restorative heart of King David, and then how Absalom makes his way into that. To wrap up, I was asked just to share a small portion of my testimony. I am very thankful for a mother who had tenacity to take 4 children by herself. Dad was around, but not involved. Not involved in her upbringing, not involved in church. My mother, all 5 foot nothing of her, took these 4 kids to church every Sunday, for every Sunday service and every Sunday school without fail. And, despite our pleadings and our arguments and our persuasiveness to not go for whatever reason, she persevered. She won the day. And through that time, God brought incredible people into my life, whether it was in my 5th grade Sunday school class or one of the pastors when I was a young man. These people are now leading some of the largest ministries right around here. And they have opened doors for me. They've given me encouragement and blessing. But they also helped me to understand that I needed to confess my sins. That I needed to believe in a Christ who died on the cross for the forgiveness of my sin. They helped me believe that, just as we just celebrated, that he didn't just die, but he was resurrected on this Easter Sunday. And that we, through that confession and belief, can have eternal life with him. Thank you very much for letting me come today.